So, why do people deliberately set fires? In this video, I'm going to talk to you about the theories behind this. And buckle up because this might be a long one. So to start off with, we're looking at typologies. So Tyler and Gannon in 2020. So what they looked at is the common factors of people who engage with fire use or fire setting. And you've got the less common factors. So the commonality amongst people who engage in this behaviour is seeking revenge, vandalism, or just generally antisocial behaviour. Sometimes excitement, that fire is intrinsically exciting for individuals. And the less common factors were that people would do it for profit, because of mental health difficulties, to conceal crime or the crime scene or acts of crime, that cry of help to try and get some sort of interaction from other people to get support, to enhance that heroic status. So in the last video, I spoke about self-esteem. So that was something we spoke about on there, but that was a less common factor. And to engage in self-harm as well. So fire use as an act of self-harm. But the problem here is that there wasn't any inter-rater reliability figures, and the motivations for individuals engaging in fire are really complex and multifaceted. And as we go through the when we go through some of the later models, you'll be able to see kind of how multifaceted it is. And with the Tyler and Gannon article, it reviewed and critiqued the existing classification for deliberate fire settings. This is where this idea comes from. Then good old Freud. We can look at this without bringing him in. So with the psychoanalytic perspective. So as you can imagine, Freud says that the form and motion of the flame suggests the phallus in action. So with Freud's early work, it drew on Greek mythology and philosophical approaches to propose that fire for the primitive man was a symbol of the libido. So with this, that Freud even proposed that the desire to acquire power over fire relates to that sexualized desire to extinguish flames through a stream of urine from the phallus. And arson is also part of a triad, so bedwetting, fire setting, and cruelty to animals. He also said that arsonists are sexually motivated, and fire setting was linked to sexual drives, sexual gratification, and sexual deviance. And this led to much work looking for associations between fire settings and eugenesis, fire setting and sexual gratification. So there's lots more, if you're interested in this, there's lots more research you can look at. But empirical research has failed to support this hypothesis. And then we move on to the functional analysis paradigm. So with this, we look at the antecedents, we look at the triggers, and we look at fire setting. So with the antecedents, so individuals' experience with fire, this could be watching fire, setting fires, seeing fires, learning that they are destructive. Psychosocial disadvantage, this could be maybe poor experience with caregivers and any sort of associated consequences, so poor attachment, poor coping styles. The antecedents could also be linked to life dissatisfaction and self-loathing. So thinking about that low self-esteem again, maybe depression or low mood, or feeling that they're not gaining or achieving their goals. The antecedents can also be about social ineffectiveness. So it could be experiences with rejection, poor conflict resolution skills, and limited peer support. Then we have the triggering stimulus. So this could be internal or external triggers. So it could be feelings and urges as well. But this can then leave the person that's going to engage in arson or fire setting feels powerless or out of control. And then you have the fire setting behaviour, which is reinforced both positively and negatively by the fire itself and the responses of caregivers or others, and that could be authorities, professionals. And this was further developed into the only viable option theory. So at the time of setting their fire, many arsonists view it as the only possible solution to either the emotional state, to the problem or the circumstances in which they find themselves in. So although many of those key assumptions are empirically supported, as we've seen in this video and the last. But this does not include the thoughts and cognition, which is developed more in Gannon's MTAF, which we're going to look at a little bit later on, with the fire scripts. Also contributes to thinking about the thoughts and the cognitions. But those who set fires for financial gain, insurance for revenge, might not be psychologically disadvantaged. And this assumes that everyone has a negative upbringing who engage in fires, which when we look at the characteristics in the last video, and if we look at some of these areas, that's not true. And it assumes everyone has a positive experience of fire. Again, not true. And mental health is not accounted for explicitly. So again, although it's useful, there are a lot of elements that aren't included or that aren't considered. So then you've got thinking about the dynamic behaviour theory. So this is similar to the functional analysis theory. And this idea is that there's historical factors that predispose antisocial actions. So whether that is social disadvantage or social ineffectiveness, so this could be like thinking about a deprived childhood, maybe can't communicate their needs, and maybe poor attachment as well. But then this is paired with a childhood experience with fire. So this could be about seeing fire, it could be seeing maybe burnt out cars, it could be having that fascination with fire, or even sometimes being burnt with fire, it being used as something that isn't pleasant. And with this, then we pair it with the environmental reinforcers associated with fire. So this could be about watching the fire going up, it could be about seeing a fire engine coming, it could be that excitement, feeling that they've achieved something, even thinking about that power and revenge. It could even be about seeing someone else's suffer. So with this is developed based on empirical evidence, so relating to juvenile or young offender rather than adult fire setting. And again, there isn't any focus on the cognitions here, but this articulates how key psychological factors could contribute to fire setting. But it doesn't think about desistance, it isn't empirically tested. And that again, there isn't any explicit reference to maybe mental health difficulties or fire setting as an add-on to a predominantly criminal lifestyle. So moving on, we have the Continuum of Fire Use Theories. This is by Horsley in 2020. So with this, the CoFUT represents the psychology of the human-fire relationship as a whole rather than solely as a fire setting offence. And this was developed by Dr. Horsley as part of their PhD. And the process of reinforcing is depicted by the two arrows. So with this, you can see that fluid nature of fire use between different people and perhaps even across one person's lifespan. And that's denoted by the continuums across the bottom and that top line. So from non-criminalised to criminalised. And the CoFUT consists of the three core elements. So you've got the transitory emotional state, the sense of self, and psychological well-being. So what this means is with the transient emotional state or transitory emotional state, so this relates to that immediate and short-term emotional benefit of engaging with fire use. And this theme is separated by two sub-themes, so thinking about immediate gratification and a mediator. So with immediate gratification, it's the way in which fire use directly and immediately affects participants' physiological state in a positive way. So for example, if it increases their level of arousal in the form of an adrenaline rush, or of an energy boost. So it could be even when lighting a candle to relax, or even watching a log fire. So remember this, we're not just talking about fire use in the context of an offending behaviour or related to the antisocial offending behaviour. Then the other part of the transient emotional state is the mediator. Sorry. And this is the way in which fire can indirectly affect emotional state. So in other words, fire use can evoke a transient change which acts as a mediator and in turn impacts upon the emotional state. So, for example, that fire use represents a form sometimes for escapism. For some people, it can be a reminder that they've put someone that they are powerful. It can have a positive effect on their emotional state. And those who've engaged in sometimes in criminalized forms of fire use, so thinking about arson offences or institutional fire setting, also speak of another mediator, problem resolution or problem solving, which is where they use fire to solve interpersonal or sometimes maybe environmental problems, leading them sometimes to feel better. So, for example, maybe setting a fire in your room or in your cell, maybe to get your needs met. So within that, the transient emotional state, you have the a mediator, and you also have the immediate gratification. So then we have a sense of self. So this is irrespective of how someone uses fires. It's a sense that the fire forms part of who they are. And this differs from the transient shift in emotional state because it relates to the longer term. So the sense of self is separated into two sub-themes. Identity, so firesetting being part of who they are, the connection with others, and self-esteem, so maybe feeling the success of being able to light a fire from scratch. But with this, then you've got the psychological well-being, and then thinking about the impact of this. So you have the positive and the negative impact. So the long-term impact of fire use can vary as really that the function of the type of relationship a person has formed with it. So in other words, that people that engage in fire setting offences or maybe institutional fire setting, so using fire use, kind of sitting at that criminalised end of the spectrum, that can have a detrimental impact on their psychological well-being. Whereas the others that sit more closer to their non-criminalised, maybe someone hasn't been reprimanded or there's kind of a more of a positive impact, it's sitting more on the side of the non-criminalised fire use. So again, this is a new way to look at understanding fire setting and fire use. And I think it's a really interesting way to look at it beyond the criminal side of things or the criminalised part of it, because many, if not all, I'd say many people have relationships to fire, whether that you like watching a log fire. If you think Netflix's biggest streamed show was people watching the fire being the logs on the fire, so that just shows people's relationship with fire. But again, this goes through to people using fire in an offending way as well. So looking at the next element, we have scripts. So scripts and understanding scripts is really common if we're looking at in violence and a sexual offending literature. So kind of thinking about the aggression script, so the kind of the who, what, when, where, how, and why behaviour, and thoughts to develop. It develops in childhood through observational learning. But what scripts are, it refers to this knowledge, the systematic knowledge and structures that facilitate individuals' interpretation, evaluation, prediction, production, and control of circumstances that are goal dependent and guide behaviour. But we all have scripts, as I've got there. When we enter a restaurant, we all know what to do. So whether this is the scripts that we hold in offending or just in terms of things that we do in life, we all have them. But Gannon et al. In 2020 suggests there are two probable fire scripts. So you've got the aggression fire fusion script. So this is used when indirect or emotionally attached aggression is valued. So fire becomes central to sending a message to others or enacting revenge, as it's powerful, it's authoritative, and it's emotionally detached. So for example, the example given there, so I use fire to send a message to those who have wronged me. So it's fused with that aggression. It is proving something, it's sending a message. But then we've got the other one. So thinking about fire coping script. So the fire is used to cope with sometimes a problematic or overwhelming situation. And fire is used to maybe get the attention of other people, but it could also facilitate change. So again, the idea here of I use fire to cope in times of extreme stress or arousal, or I use fire to be seen, heard, or taken care of or noticed. And then Butler and Gannon in 2015 suggested other scripts, so that fire is a powerful messenger. Fire is used as a way to send a message, whether that be for revenge or sometimes for warning, but also it can be a way to get support or get help from others. Also think about the scripts, and we spoke about this, that fire is the best way to destroy evidence. And linked in with Horsley's work is that fire is soothing for some. So again, within the scripts, we're thinking about going from that non-criminalised to the criminalised way. But also when we're thinking about that fire still could be soothing, but it could be paired with it's destroying evidence, but it's still soothing to look at. So let's move on to the final theory. So this is the multi-trajectory theory of adult fire setting. So this is Gannon et al. 2012, 2022. And within this, there are two tiers. So this attempts to explain the key psychological factors associated with deliberate fire setting, but also thinking about subtypes of fire setters. So again, going back to that last video when I spoke about different characteristics of an individual. And within this theory, it uses a construct of social knitting. So what this means is to unify and combine the strongest elements of prior theories along with contemporary empirical evidence and clinical experience to generate the MTAF. So basically, all the things that come together to lead the person to set a fire and then trying to separate them into groups based on the motivators. So we have tier 1. So with tier 1, this integrates current theory to generate ideas into a framework of factors and mechanisms. So these interact and generate reinforced deliberate fire setting. So thinking about the developmental, the context, psychological, vulnerabilities and strength, proximal factors, triggers, moderators, critical risk factors, reinforcement and desistance. I've got another slide that's going to explain that in a lot more detail. Then tier 2 summarises the likely pattern of characteristics. So again, we spoke about characteristics in the last video, and with this, that explain key typologies of fire setting as well as possible treatment needs. So more recently, when we're thinking about this series, so this is the tier 1. So the first is this framework that describes the mechanisms by which distal and proximal factors facilitate fire setting. So within the developmental context and the proximal factors, these are hypothesized to be associated with deliberate fire setting. So the MTAF suggests that the individual's caregiver environment is critical because of the potential impact caregivers can have on the development of an individual's self-regulation skills and self-esteem. And in addition, the caregiver environment provides an individual with their earliest learning experiences. So this could be including about the form or even the function of fire. Opportunities that the individual has to learn about or to manipulate fires are likely to be somewhat determined by cultural forces. So if you look at Fessler's work from 2006, for example, that this is children in Western cultures often experience very restricted access to fire. Finally, with the MTAF, that you've got the biological and temperamental factors. So it's thinking about IQ are likely to play an important role in both the learning and self-regulation. Then if we move on to the next box over, the psychological vulnerabilities / strengths. So these are the factors that individuals in the developmental context will lead them into entering into adulthood with a unique combination of psychological strengths and vulnerabilities in the 4 key areas associated with fire setting. So inappropriate fire interest or inappropriate fire scripts, offence supportive attitudes, self or emotional regulation issues, and communication problems. But inappropriate fire interest refers to when an individual's interest in fire goes beyond the enjoyment of the normative fire experiences. So again, thinking about the non-criminalised use on Dr. Horsley's work. This could be about bonfires or candles. So instead, with the inappropriate fire interest of fire scripts, individuals are transfixed in the presence of fire and experience an irresistible urge to seek out or to set fires. But this could be that the individual may also hold those inappropriate fire scripts. So a fire script is, as I spoke about on a couple of slides ago, is that learned cognitive rule about how and when fire should be used. So for members of society who hold appropriate fire scripts, fire could be viewed as cosy or soothing, as long as used with care. So lighting a log on a cold day and in a not in a way that's going to risk setting a fire outside of the fireplace. But in cases where inappropriate fire scripts have been developed, fire misuse becomes viewed as helpful. Then thinking about the offence supportive attitude. So this will be where an individual holds attitudes that generally support any criminal behaviour or attitude that specifically support fire settings, such as believing that fire can be controlled. And within the tier 1 of this theory, it suggests that individuals may have self or emotional regulation issues. So those with a deficit in this area may have issues with impulsivity, anger, and may engage in inappropriate coping mechanisms. So in contrast, strong areas of self-regulation may lead to the individual engaging in premeditated inappropriate behaviour, such as precisely planning a fire. And then with psychological vulnerability, that when we think about communication problems, so we've spoken about self-esteem and lack of assertiveness, but also with poor social skills, this can have an impact on someone's ability to form and maintain relationships. So when we're thinking about this, if individuals enter, you've got the childhood that goes through into adulthood. So many enter into adulthood with these patterns of strengths and vulnerabilities in these psychological areas, which predispose them to engaging in fire setting. Then we've got the moderators. So with this looks at the extent to which the proximal factors and kind of the triggers impact upon an individual's psychological vulnerabilities, and they'll be influenced by 2 moderating factors, such as self-esteem and mental health. So if the individual has high self-esteem and good mental health, they are likely to be somewhat protected from the negative impacts of those proximal factors and kind of thinking about the triggers on their psychological vulnerabilities as well. However, compromised self-esteem or mental health difficulties will offer little protection for the individual from the influence of those negative proximal factors and the triggers on the psychological vulnerabilities. So in this situation, pre-existing psychological vulnerabilities will easily be primed to engage in further behaviour. Then you've got the circle of the critical risk factors. So within this, the MTAF posits the proximal factors and moderators prime or exacerbate the individual's psychological vulnerabilities, such as they reach a critical threshold, and at this point, the vulnerabilities represent critical risk factors that will lead to fire setting. Then we've got the reinforcement and assistance. So this highlights a role of affect and cognition during and after the fire setting in determining whether fire setting is repeated. However, the MTAF also explains that some individuals desist from setting further fires. It suggests that desistance occurs as a result of the individual undergoing some sort of cognitive transformation, either through therapeutic intervention or maybe from external opportunities, so maybe a different peer group or kind of a different environment that they're in. So that is at tier 1. Then we have tier 2. So within this, you've got the 5 trajectories. So what this is that you've got the subtypes of fire setting individuals that hold a particular patterns of the critical risk factors from tier 1. So here we've got antisocial, grievance, fire interest, emotionally expressive or the need for recognition, and multifaceted. So just to break it down, so we've got antisocial. So what this trajectory describes is individuals whose main critical risk factor is general offence supportive attitudes. So they may have difficulties with self-regulation, they may have problems with being impulsive, and with this, the individuals are likely to use fire to achieve various antisocial or criminally influenced goals. They're unlikely to hold any specific interest in fire, but may hold the script that fire is the best way to destroy evidence. Then moving on to the second one, grievance. So the grievance trajectory refers to individuals whose main critical risk factor relates to self-regulation issues, so i.e. anger problems. And the MTAF suggests that these individuals are likely to have communication deficits, such as lack of assertiveness, and may hold a fire aggression fusion script. And their primary motivation for setting fire is revenge. Then fire interest. So the fire interest trajectory describes individuals whose main critical risk factor is the inappropriate interest in fire or inappropriate fire scripts. Now, these individuals are also likely to hold offence-supportive attitudes that specifically relate to fire setting. So they will likely set fires for sensory stimulation or may either hold a fire coping script or fire is self-soothing script. Then we have emotionally expressive or the need for recognition. So this trajectory refers to individuals whose main critical risk factor is communication difficulties. And the trajectory is further broken down into two subtypes, so the emotionally expressive and the need for recognition. So while both trajectories have difficulties with communication, they also have needs in other areas. So individuals who fall within the emotionally expressive trajectory also have emotional regulation difficulties. So, for example, with problem solving, impulsivity, they are maybe likely to set fires as maybe a way to get help or support from other people or as a form of self-harm, and may hold a fire coping script or that fire is a messenger of distress script. In contrast, individuals who, following the need for recognition trajectory, have intact facets of self and regulation, so their fires are often planned. They are thought to set fires to gain social status, sometimes from tackling the fire or raising the alarm, and may hold a script around fire being a powerful messenger. Then the multifaceted one. So the multifaceted trajectory refers to individuals whose primary critical risk factors are both inappropriate fire interest and offence-supportive attitudes. And they are also likely to have psychological vulnerabilities in the realm of self-regulation and communication. And as a result of the pervasive difficulties, the multifaceted individuals are likely to have engaged in extensive repeat fire setting for many different reasons, and are likely to hold scripts that guide the use of fire in a variety of situations. So it's a mixed version of the other four. That is the end of looking at the theory. So I'll stop sharing. As always, I really hope you found that interesting. Please let me know any questions in the comments, maybe any other things that you'd like me to explore in the world of forensic psychology. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe and take care.